Sometimes it's glitchy. I'll look on mine too.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Go
Good?
ahead.
Okay. All right, let's try again. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to PA Lyme's virtual Lyme impact session. If that's what you registered for, you're in the right place. No, it's
Uh,
not working.
it comes up and then it says it's not. So
Well, you
look into
might.
it, Bill.
We'll just lure into it. Okay. We are so pleased to have Dr. Kathleen King, DPT, with us tonight. She is going to be presenting her program, Primal Trust, Getting Empowered to Find Freedom from Chronic Illness, Stress, and Trauma. And tonight we have with us from PA Lyme, I'm Amy Teal. I am the program director for the Dare to be Tick Aware Tick Prevention Education Program. We have Kathy Rubel, who is PA Lyme's secretary, and she is a Dare to be Tick Aware facilitator. We also have Bill Moore. He is the director of IT for PA Lyme. He runs the Pittsburgh Lyme Disease Support Group, and he is also a Dare to be Tick Aware facilitator. Real quick, some 2024 accomplishments that PA Lyme has had that we want to share with you. In the spring, we had a very successful patients and parents conference with 60 plus attendees, about a dozen vendors, and timely, informative Lyme and tick-borne disease lectures. We're very pleased to have added 3 new regions, the Philly Lyme vendors and timely, informative Lyme and tick-borne disease lectures. We're very pleased also the Blanco Lyme Support Group and the Chester County Lyme Support Group. We also have the virtual Young Adult Lyme Social Group. We meet monthly, the fourth Thursday of every month. That's ages 18 plus. Typically, it's about 18 to about 30 folks who self-identify as young adult. And then also our legislative efforts, grassroots action helped to get Senate Bill 232, the Lyme disease education of parents and establishing protocols for tick bites in schools, passed. That's now Act 120. And we also want to thank those of you who heeded our call to action and wrote to your representatives to help with that legislation. Moving forward, please mark your calendars in 2025. Again, that young adult Lyme social group, if you know a young adult who needs that kind of support. Again, the fourth Thursday of every month, 7 to 9, that's virtual via Zoom. Our next meeting is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, and we always list that on our Facebook page and send an email reminder out. And going forward with the virtual Lyme Impact series in January, we are going to have the Jennifer Fagan, Jeremy Shelton, and Jenna Luche Thayer doing medical gaslighting and Lyme disease, the patient experience. And then in June of 2025, we are going to be partnering with iLads and Drexel University and hosting a medical practitioners conference. Again, all of this info will be available via our social media channels and through email. Just real quick housekeeping, all questions will be answered at the end. If you're on Zoom, you can put it in the Q&A button, which is down there at the bottom. Just click on that and you'll see a window open up and you can type in your question. And if you're watching on Facebook, you can add your question in the comments as we will be monitoring both and answering them. And so now to tonight's guest, Dr. Kathleen King. Thank you again so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to this. A bio here on Dr. King before I give it over to Kathy for the interview. Dr. Kathleen King, DPT, is a leading expert in neuroplasticity education, mind-body healing methods, neurophysiology of trauma and attachment, and emotional regulation practices. Having personally healed from complex trauma and illness, Dr. King offers a path to healing through brain retraining and nervous system regulation. As CEO and founder of the Primal Trust Academy and community, she empowers others to find freedom from chronic illness, stress, and trauma. And you can see down there on the right, we've listed the link there for you. And then one last thing is just so you all know for tonight, we're not doing our typical presentation that we typically do. We're actually going to have Kathy do an interview Q&A with Dr. King. So I'm going to hand that over to them to get started.
Thanks, Amy. And welcome, Dr. King. We're really happy to have you here. I'm excited to have you share information about Primal Trust with our community. I have struggled with mold toxicity previously and was sensitive to everything. And I had 2 Lyme literate doctors who recommended using Primal Trust along with other treatments. I started the program in February and have found it really helpful. So I really enjoy that you share a lot of different techniques and that you explain the science behind the approach. So I'm really excited to share that with our community. So
Thank
if you
you.
could start by just telling us a little bit about the Primal Trust program and how it relates to tick-borne illness, that would be great.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the Primal Trust program was born out of my own experience of struggling with chronic symptoms for many, many years. Really, I started having symptoms in 2003. I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme in 2014. I spent most of my 30s mostly housebound and sometimes bedbound. So I know what it's like to be pretty debilitated. And I also know what it's like to go from doctor to doctor and feel that hopeless journey sometimes. And so for me, I was not able to tolerate treatments. I couldn't even tolerate like a drop of herbal formulas. I was that person that was hypersensitive. And, it can get scary when you have all of these lab tests showing these infections, and yet you can't even do the protocols given to you. I couldn't tolerate binders and saunas, and I couldn't detoxify. I tried to eat as perfect as I could, but I was still very sick. And yeah, it was pretty hopeless. And then I had a turning point, and this is what leads me into what Primal Trust is. I have a background of being a physical therapist. And before I became very ill, I worked a lot with chronic pain. I worked a lot with the brain and the nervous system. And I understood that the brain processed chronic pain. And I used to teach patients how to rehabilitate their brain and nervous system to help the brain process pain differently, as well as how to stabilize their spine. I used to teach something called functional neurology exercises, which are these eye exercises that target the brain, as well as different like mind body practices to teach the brain, the limbic system to process pain differently. All of those years that I was sick, I didn't have chronic pain because I had tools to alleviate chronic pain. So I was one of those fortunate ones. Now, the problem is that I didn't have chronic pain, but I had a lot of chronic other issues like neurological issues and fatigue and all sorts of things from Lyme. And I didn't realize the tools that I had for chronic pain would help the symptoms of Lyme disease, mold toxicity, etc. Until I got to the point where I couldn't tolerate treatments and I had to do something different. So I decided to start doing my old exercises for the brain. I'm like, well, maybe the brain has more to do with this infection and these symptoms than I have been told. And sure enough, within a week, I was able to drive again. I couldn't drive for a long time. I could finally handle light and sound. I was literally living in a dark, quiet room because I couldn't handle sound. I couldn't handle light. I couldn't drive. Within a couple months of doing brain work and nervous system work, my 20-year history of panic and anxiety subsided. I got more energy. I was finally able to walk. I went from walking, down my driveway to eventually walking a couple miles. It was like, oh my gosh. And so I learned everything I could about brain retraining, nervous system regulation, somatic therapies, vagus nerve toning, and over time put together a program that I used for myself and I use now for thousands of people to help them improve their function with chronic Lyme disease, knowing that a lot of our function is being affected by our brain processing, by the inflammation in our body, by the way the brain and the nervous system communicate. And so Primal Trust is the outcome of that experience and my background as a physical therapist and literally putting together a physical therapy protocol for the brain and the nervous system to help with chronic conditions.
Yeah. That's great. And then you alluded to this, but can you talk more specifically about how Primal Trust is different than other brain retraining
Yeah,
programs?
thank you. Good question. So, fortunately, I have a background as a somatically trained practitioner. I was trained in the field of clinical somatics, manual physical therapy, a lot of body based practices. So when I started to do this brain retraining recovery, I realized that they were missing a big piece, which was the communication from the body back to the brain. Brain retraining is amazing and a wonderful modality. And I really respect the pioneers in the field of brain retraining. And I know that the vagus nerve, 80% of the information that goes from your body, from the vagus nerve, goes from the body back to the brain. And so, if you're really wanting to regulate your body, I knew that brain retraining was one piece and body based therapies were another, and that they needed to be put together in a sequence that made sense. And so I brought in my background as a clinical somatic practitioner, also understanding vagus nerve exercises, functional neurology exercises, and even trauma processing work to the brain retraining world, and um, combine these approaches. And so I think a brain retraining is one slice of a pie that's actually quite large. And brain retraining, frankly, isn't for everybody at every time. Some people, I find going right into brain retraining can be counterproductive because they have certain protective mechanisms in their mind that does not want to be doing that kind of practice. And so I found that doing a program where I teach them the science, I teach them about polyvagal theory, I teach them about vagus nerve toning and breathing, and all of these other nervous system tools first before going in brain retraining allows brain retraining to have uh, a much higher success rate and a much lower resistance rate. So that's how my program differs from a couple of the other leading brain retraining programs.
Yeah, thank you. And I have experienced that the vagal toning and the somatic work does make a difference. So it has been nice to have that all combined in one package. Um, and you talk a lot in the program about the science, and I have found that to be particularly helpful, um, to understand, like, why are we having panic attacks, or, how is this moving my eyes or whatever helping my system? Can you talk a little bit about some of the science behind what you're teaching in Primal
Yeah.
Trust?
Yeah. Well, if you're like me, I had people telling me for a while to do nervous system work with my chronic Lyme symptoms, and I got pretty mad at them. I was like, I have a real infection, and you're telling me to go do some breathing? Like, you don't understand. And to me, it felt invalidating for a long time. And so I teach a lot of science that I've learned because I know that it takes some convincing to do some of these practices when you are suffering so much. Because it seems like, what in the world is this silly eye exercise or this visualization? How is that actually going to affect this stealth infection in my body? Well, the cool thing is that there is a lot of science to support what we do. So, a few pieces of that. First of all, the science behind limbic system impairment. Our limbic system is the survival part of our brain that's constantly deciding if our body is in threat or if we're safe. And when it senses pathogens and toxins, as well as stressful experiences, it will create a biochemistry to respond to that stress, to that threat. And when we have chronic infection, sometimes the brain can interpret everything as a threat because it's sensing that the body, that the immune system is active. And it's like, wow, we've got a war going on in here. Now, the problem is that it might be accurate that there is an immune response that needs to happen. But what's not accurate is to the degree of threat that the brain is interpreting this as and sending stress chemistry through the body, creating more inflammation than is necessary. So, what can happen, I think, a lot with chronic Lyme disease and the co-infections is that the immune system starts to go after it. And then there can be this tipping point where the brain starts to interpret way too much threat. And it actually sends the signal for the immune system to like go into a full on, World War III. And it creates so much inflammation in the body. So the limbic system impairment science is all about basically biohacking our amygdala to turn down the volume of threat so that there isn't so much of a war going on. There isn't so much of this stress biochemistry being flooded the body. And what happens is the immune system can actually get more discerning. When there's not such a big threat, it gets smarter and it stops producing excessive cytokines and T cells and macrophages that might not be appropriate, where the immune system will sometimes go way over after certain things and miss other things because there's just too much going on. And so I think the first piece is that understanding immune modulation as part of the recovery process of Lyme disease is crucial, and understanding ways to affect your immune modulation. So limbic system retraining is one direct way to do that. Another piece of the science that I think is important to understand is the science behind cell danger response. The science that the body does have a normal danger response that it goes into when you get an infection. And the body is supposed to come out of that danger response and come back into homeostasis. Now, for some of us, that cell danger response can get triggered and it doesn't shut off. In fact, it gets more and more and more overreactive. And then the immune system gets more and more and more out of balance, underreactive in certain places and overreactive in others. And when you understand the science that a lot of your symptoms are actually the immune system symptoms and not directly just the infection, that the immune system has kind of gone haywire. I learned that learning how to directly affect the cell danger response in my body through targeting the nervous system was a way to help improve my function and improve the intelligence of my own immune system to find what the real threats were. So those two pieces I think are crucial to understand: limbic system impairment and cell danger response, to get a more holistic understanding of the system of the body that is behaving in a maladaptive way to these infections. We know that some people can have active Lyme and co-infections and not be extremely symptomatic. Why is that? Their immune system is kind of is in more balance. They're not flooded with massive stress inflammatory chemistry. Their cell danger response is more in check. The immune system is probably working on it, but it's not going haywire. And that understanding was crucial for me to reframe what was happening in my body. Yes, there may be this infection, and there is this massive overreaction immune modulation issue that also needs to be attended to.
Thank you. I think it's a complex science, but I do think understanding the science is really helpful. We're also using some words that people may not be familiar
Yeah.
with. Can you,
Sorry.
it's all right, talk a little bit about what somatic therapy and vagal
Yeah.
toning
Okay. I'm
is?
so sorry. I forget. Okay. Yes, I get on my nerd science soapbox. Okay, somatic therapy. Somatic means body-based therapies. It means moving the body in certain ways to help it to discharge emotion, to discharge inflammation. So somatic therapies are ways to target the autonomic nervous system of the body, which is what runs everything, and get that nervous system to send messages of safety to the brain and to the body to cause your rest, digest, and repair system to come back online. And that's important because when we're stuck in chronic illness, often we are stuck in a fight, flight, danger response in the body. And it's very difficult for the body to do both fighting an infection and digesting and detoxifying and healing at the same time. And so we want to target the body and the brain through somatic therapies, through brain retraining. And I also use the word vagus nerve toning. The vagus nerve is this master nerve that runs from our brain throughout all the organs in our body, and is like a control switch for if you're in rest and digest, or are you in fight and survive mode. And so there are ways to target that nerve of the body to get it to help the body to calm down, to process stress, to decrease inflammation, to improve digestion, to improve nutrient absorption, to improve detoxification. So when you are trying to fight an infection, it makes sense to not only be taking protocols, but to get your own nervous system and your own brain and your own vagus nerve all on board to be allies in this process in a way that helps them to function most optimally. So I'm describing processes that, yes, somatic processes, body-based practices, vagus nerve practices, brain retraining practices to target the nervous system.
Yeah. And can you give people sort of an idea of what to expect if they were to join the Primal Trust program? Tell us a little bit about what the
Yeah.
program looks like.
Yeah. One thing I want to say as I start to get into that, I wrote a free book called How Healing Happens. It's available on my website. It's about 130 pages, and it's actually very colorful with all sorts of graphics of everything that I'm describing and exercises and how the program works. So if what I'm speaking feels like I can't keep up, you can download this for free and go through all of the science as well as examples of somatic practices, brain retraining, vagus nerve toning, all for free to just like, does this resonate? Is this right for me right now? So I want to say that first of all. The way the program works is I have courses that I've created that walk you sequentially through the process of regulating your brain and your nervous system. And it starts with my level 1 program called Regulate. And this is like your nervous system toolkit. It's what you do is we have a membership and it's a monthly membership, so you can cancel anytime. And in that membership, you have access to these trainings, to these courses that you can watch at your own pace. We also have live classes every single day to get help and do this practice with others, but some people just like to do it by themselves too, so that's fine. And you just watch the video step by step, and it's going to take you through a sequence of, first doing some vagus nerve exercises and some breath work, and eventually some brain retraining, and eventually some somatic exercises, and eventually maybe some emotional processing. So it's a program that is put in a very specific order to help your nervous system to slowly open up in a way that feels safe. There's a lot of practices out there. And what people don't understand is that when you're working with the brain and the nervous system, you have to be careful because if you do too much too soon, it can kind of backfire. It'd be like doing a big treatment too soon. You have to kind of inch your way into teaching the brain and the nervous system to move into that rest and digest mode. It won't just do it right away when it's been fighting a war. It thinks it's not safe to open up and to feel safe. Actually, it's not safe to feel safe. We have to teach it over time that it's safe to feel safe. So the program walks you through the practices in a very careful, modulated way to build a whole toolkit. We teach over 40 different exercises. Now, you won't do all 40 exercises every day. You get to pick and choose which ones feel right for you as we go through it, and I help give you guidelines of how to do that. But it's ultimately about developing a daily exercise routine for your brain and nervous system. This is one of the most powerful things you can do if you're dealing with chronic illness, because you might be going to your doctor for this protocol, but you can do physical therapy for your brain and nervous system to help your own immune system um, be intelligent, to help the protocol to stick, to help your body process what you're taking, to help your body detoxify. So to me, this process doesn't replace what you're doing. It actually works with it and makes it even more stealth of an approach. So I just want to say that. The second thing I want to say is that a big part that I have found with chronic illness is deep, unresolved trauma and stress lodged in the nervous system. And while we need to have nervous system tools to practice, we also need to cultivate awareness about why we might be sick in the first place, why our immune system was so overburdened that it couldn't handle the infection. what is happening in there? Why is this a challenge for you? Whereas maybe one of your family members, they got bit as well and they got sick and they got better. There's often a set point in the nervous system where it kind of goes into that immune modulation problem. And you end up with chronic unresolving infection as part of it. So we have a level 2 program as well in Primal Trust that's all on dealing with this deep emotional resistance, dealing with the original setup that might have caused your brain and nervous system to kind of go haywire in the first place. And we have found that we have incredible success with people who do both level 1 and level 2 and get through both of them. Um, their symptoms drastically subside. After level 1 alone, usually people notice a big difference. We've got some pretty stunning statistics, if I do say so myself, that those who come into our program with Lyme disease and they complete level 1, which is 2 to 3 months, they report a 51% rate of functional improvement. 51% rate of functional improvement in 3 months. That says something. Now, some of them are doing protocols alongside of it, but it makes the protocols better. Many of them are not because they can't tolerate protocols. So there's something to what we're doing, and we have the data to back what I'm saying. So that's my soapbox. I'll pause.
I will say, I want to ask you to clarify a little bit. When you hear trauma or emotional things underlying,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily that. Sometimes they talk about big T trauma versus little T trauma. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about.
Sure. I have a lot of people who come into the program like, oh, I don't have any trauma. I had a great childhood. That's not me. And then they start doing some of the practices that we teach in level 2, especially, and they realize that there's somebody who was trained to always say yes when they meant no, was trained to always make other people feel safe at the expense of themselves. They're deathly afraid of being seen and speaking their truth. And that was the result of little T traumas, meaning nothing huge happened in the childhood, but there was maybe unspoken rules that you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to be loved and worthy and value. And that can actually be a trauma to the nervous system because it's the message that it's not safe to be me. I have to always be on guard. I have to feel what other people are wanting. I can't just speak my truth or I might get rejection. And so there's lots of ways where trauma can build up in the nervous system. It can build up even from just a really intense job or an intense relationship or intense childbirth experience. There's a lot of different ways that trauma can cause the nervous system to reach a breaking point where the immune system kind of goes haywire. So, yeah, good question about that.
And you've answered some of my questions as we go. Is there anything else that you would particularly recommend in conjunction or as a way to approach like Lyme or tick-borne diseases?
Yeah. So I have worked with thousands of people with Lyme disease, and I have found that there are some themes. Now, this isn't going to apply to everybody, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But one of the themes is our relationship, especially with our mother and our family, and looking for what kind of healing might need to take place there. What kind of resentments or things that were never talked about need to be discussed. So, family relationships are really important. Um, and I think that there's something that may happen in the immune system if we grow up in an environment that's really dysfunctional. And maybe you can't repair that relationship, but you can do some processing about it to be able to free your nervous system from what might be going on there. So that's one thing I want to say is a pattern. These are just patterns. Another pattern that I see is this, what I described earlier, when you've got a lot of trauma around being able to be your true self. I have seen that the immune system, when somebody really gets in touch with who they really are and what they really love, in other words, when they get in touch with their authenticity and they finally feel safe to express themselves, to go after the job they really love, to do the things, the hobbies they really love, and they show up for themselves. This sense of authenticity of I know who I am, I know what I love, and I'm going to meet my needs does something. I see people have amazing turnarounds when they've kind of had a moment where they've come home to themselves. And I would just say it's almost like the immune system starts to recognize self versus other. It translates all the way inside of their body that the immune system seems to get smarter as to what belongs in the body and what doesn't when you get more aware of how you want to live your life, what's authentic to you. And it might seem a little metaphysical, but I'm telling you, I have just had so many interviews where people would say, I finally chose me. I showed up for myself and my symptoms just fell away. And these lab tests show I'm negative for Lyme disease now. I've seen that happen multiple times. So there's something to this. I know for me, I was really living out of alignment. I was in a religion that I didn't want to be in. I was in a marriage that was not right for me. I was really hidden around about who I was, how I wanted to express myself. And part of the nervous system work that I did helped me to build the safety to express myself. So it was like the nervous system work had to come first, where I had to learn how to feel safe, and then feel safe to speak my truth. But as I made changes in my life, my symptoms just seemed to fall away. It was almost like my life force came back online. And I just think that there was an intelligence that was restored to my immune system. Now, I can't prove any of these things. These things are all very subjective, but they are patterns. So I guess I would say working on healing family relationships and working on coming into your true self alignment are things that you can do alongside nervous system work to help support the healing process.
And then, is there anything else in general that you would like to share? Um, any other
Yeah.
insights that come
Yeah.
to mind?
Um, I know this seems ironic, but spending time in nature, um, there long walks in nature or sitting outside in nature. I just feel like there's something very soothing to the nervous system when we can get out of our daily hustle and just appreciate the beauty around us. I spent a lot of time in nature, and I think it's actually the most direct way to calm the nervous system is to just be outside. And so sometimes, like, people are like, I don't want to do all these tools and practices. And I would say if you can spend an hour or two a day outside and enjoy the beauty around you, that is going to be so soothing to your body. We really want to give our body the space for it to perceive what is a threat and what isn't, what needs to be cleaned up, what needs to be gone after. And when our body and our brain is so overburdened with stress, with to-dos, with messages, with scrolling, with thinking negative thoughts, it's like the body doesn't have the space to be wise. And whether you're doing a protocol or not, I know that what helps people heal is giving the nervous system spaciousness. So whatever that is for you, maybe for you it's swimming in a pool, maybe it's listening to jazz music and sipping tea, maybe it's whatever that is for you, art, journaling, maybe it's just being around other people, like going to a playground and watching children play and just imagining being a child. Whatever gives you a sense of open expansion, that is going to help your biochemistry, that is going to help your biology do what it needs to do, which is to optimize its function, to discern what processes need to be happening. So I don't want to say like these nervous system practices like directly kill Lyme disease, because that's inaccurate. These nervous system practices give your body um, a different biochemistry so that it has more capacity to do what it knows how to do. And I believe there is an intelligence in the body. I believe that it can come into harmony when given the right environment and sometimes the right external supports. So this piece is often so missing because I know for me, I was so stressed out with my diagnoses, with my lab tests. Every time I went to the doctor, like a new co-infection was found, a new like problem after problem after problem. I was so stressed out with my protocols, with the news that I had. My body did not have any ease whatsoever to be able to do anything that was part of its natural intelligence, I think. I think that's why I overreacted to everything. And so it's really important that you find a way to reframe what's going on. Yes, you may have these things happening in your body, but how can you support the body? How can you reframe what's going on in a way that calms you down about it? I chose to learn to live with this disease. There was a point that I said, okay, I'm going to live with it and I'm going to live my best life. And I just started trying to do things I loved with the very limited capacity I had. I tried to show up for my kids. I tried to be outside with them. And I made a choice to sort of surrender to the moment of what was happening. And that's when everything changed. That's when I kind of got the insight to do the old brain retraining stuff. It's when I got the insight to just give my body more ease and less stress about what was going on. And that's when everything really turned a corner for me. So sometimes when we're doing our healing protocols, we're actually adding to the stress. We're freaking out about the lab tests. We're so vigilant, type A, OCD about the protocols that that's also running stress chemistry in our body. So I'm recommending you take a step back and look at all the ways where you might be contributing to the burdening of the body, where it's having a hard time keeping up with what's in there because it's not getting biochemical signals of safety, ease, relaxation, scent, while it is dealing with a very real condition. I don't want to delegitimize any of you. Your body is working hard. How can you help it work more optimally while it's working so hard?
Yeah, I think one of the things that made sense for me was thinking about if you're in sympathetic fight or flight, your body's preparing to fight a tiger. So we
Yeah.
say this all the time, right? Like all of your body's energy is preparing for battle.
Mhm.
And it can't heal because all the energy's being used to stay safe. And if you want your body to have the energy to be able to heal, like it has to transition into that rest, digest,
Yeah.
parasympathetic state.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have found this to be a helpful way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems really counterintuitive, right? I mean, you guys are like, I feel like crap. I have all this going on, and you're telling me I have to feel safe. I am. I actually am. And that's what I try to teach is how you can hold both, the both and. I've got a very real infection happening. And I have got to shift my framework so that I feel more at ease while this thing is happening in my body. And it's possible. I never thought it was possible. I was, right up there with like massive insomnia and anxiety and just the neurological stuff, living in this dark, quiet room. I I couldn't even imagine for a while feeling safe. But eventually I reached the end of my rope and I realized that the way that I taught people to process their chronic pain is they had to feel safe feeling insane pain in their body. And I knew that it was possible for the brain to perceive suffering differently. I knew it was possible to shift pain signals when your body is screaming at you. And so I decided it was possible to shift the signals that I was experiencing as well. And that's what happened. So
That's great. I don't have any other particular questions. Do you want to give anybody information about how they can
yeah,
access Primal Trust or learn more? I know you shared the book
sure.
already.
Yeah, like I said, I have a lot of free resources to start with. So my website is primaltrust.org, and there's a free resources section. I actually have a whole Lyme disease webinar and an ebook giving some understanding of my perspectives of that. But I would highly recommend starting with this book, The How Healing Happens, because this is like a free mini program. It's a great way to get started. We also have a lot of free content on Instagram and YouTube, which is Primal Trust underscore official. So those would be some ways where every week we have a newsletter where I'm teaching things as well and blogs. So there's lots of free information. Um, and if it resonates, I highly recommend you join the community. Like I said, our stats for Lyme disease are impressive. The community is full of daily support on Zoom as well as recorded classes, and you can sign up on the website. It's a monthly membership. It's $96 a month. You can cancel anytime. You get to download your workbooks and keep those things forever, so you have the practices. And yeah, I would love to have you involved. We also put people in study groups so that you have a peer led group that you can work through the material with if you choose. You don't have to join them. But we have a lot of ways to be supported. We have one-on-one mentors to help coach you through the process. I know for me, having a brain retraining coach, a nervous system coach was invaluable because I needed somebody to help customize my journey for me. So I always recommend that. So yeah, those would be a few ways to be involved. But I really want to give you guys hope. I know some of you like when you hear these things, I was this way. I rejected this kind of knowledge for a long time. It was offensive to me. I am telling you, there is so much you can do to empower your own brain and nervous system to help you through this process and to help your kids. You know, if you've got kids who are sick, both of my kids were also sick with Lyme and co-infections. And the interesting thing was is that as I got better, they got better because their nervous system must have just sensed that mommy feels safer, mommy feels happier. It really helped them a lot. And so I highly recommend this, not just for you, but if you have family members that are dealing with this, the more regulated you are, the more that translates to the people around you, and the healthier the whole ecosystem of the family is. So, yeah, I guess that would be my spiel. And we're always available for questions. You can always contact us if you have questions. We also have a free discovery call. So if you go to my website, there's like a free discovery call section. You can talk with one of my team members and ask them about your specific condition and maybe any accommodations that you might need and ask about that. So that's available as well.
All right. Thank you so much. Bill, do we have any questions?
We don't have any right now, but if anyone has questions, you can use if you're on the Zoom webinar here, you can use the Q&A feature to ask a question, or if you're on Facebook, you just want to drop a comment on the live feed. I'll be looking for both.
I just wanted to say, Dr. King, I so appreciated the point that you made about how you felt about being resistant. Um, I had that same feeling, specifically that feeling of like, what are you talking about? I have this infection. Are you saying it's all in my head?
Yeah.
Yes and no, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way that you explained it, I really appreciated that. It really clarified um, the reasoning behind that, and it really does make sense.
Yeah. That's the biggest hurdle. That is absolutely the biggest hurdle because we have been often so gaslit, delegitimized in the journey that as soon as someone says, "Oh, you can brain retrain your way through this," you just want to be like, "I want to tell you to
Right.
go."
Well,
Um,
it
yeah,
makes you feel like it's your fault
yeah,
in a way when you're told, "Hey, it's in your brain," or you
yeah.
you need to retrain your brain.
Hmm.
I'll speak for myself, having felt physically very, very ill, it felt like another assault,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And when it's coming from trusted people who are helping you, again, speaking for myself, you feel that in a way, and it is hard to work through that and say, this will make sense, but you
Yeah.
have to start.
Yeah. It's not your fault, but your neurobiology is something that you can influence. It's not your fault how you were wired that may have caused your system to have a harder time regulating the cell danger response, the immune modulation, all of that. There's millions of influences on your genetic line all the way down to you and why your neurobiology is exactly what it is.
Mhm.
But you do have the capacity to self-regulate your biology regardless of how you were raised and I had I had the childhood of trauma. And I I know what you mean by it felt like someone was saying it's my fault. It's not.
Mhm.
And you are capable of affecting your own nervous system. And that's what we're saying. And that is good news, you guys. This is good news, not bad news, not humiliating news. This is good news that you can help your immune system improve its function.
One other comment that I thought was helpful too. You said something about the timing of doing this work. And again, I can only speak to my own situation, which felt physically very difficult until I was properly diagnosed, right? I mean, very physically incapacitated. And so my question is, you know, is it not useful to start this when you're in that sort of acute physical component and do sort of the pharmaceuticals, the herbals to kind of get stabilized a little bit and then start this? Or, do you want to be doing this even in that?
I will tell you that we have a few hundred practitioners who refer, and many of them have them do Primal Trust first because their protocols work better. What they're finding is that our ability to process the pharmaceuticals, the herbals, the whatever, is so much greater if somebody's brain and nervous system kind of has sort of a buy-in to how they need to be living, how the lifestyle needs to be during treatment. Now, you might not have the physical capacity to like do brain retraining all day, but sometimes just knowing how to sit there and do some breath work to perceive your situation even through the lens of a nervous system regulation versus just the diagnosis can set people up for a different biological response
Mm,
to the treatment.
sure.
And so I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying that you would sit there and do everything, but
Mm,
a lot of people, they will literally just listen to the program and just take a few things that they can do because their cognition isn't even to the point where they can do it all, but they're listening and they're kind of getting it and they're like, "Oh, I'm catching myself really ramping up right now. I can take a few breaths and get myself back to they're starting to recognize their own state of their nervous system so that they are in a more regulated state. So I would say that. And of course, anytime along your journey is appropriate, but we have found that a lot of practitioners are saying go do Primal Trust for a couple months and then come back and we're going to start treatment.
Yeah. So my doctors both said, yeah, do the Primal Trust because you'll be able to tolerate the treatment better.
Mhm.
Because my family were all the super sensitive. You'd try to do one drop of bentonite clay, and that triggers a huge herx. And
Mhm.
you know, so trying to find a way to make that whole process easier.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, I can tell you, I had insomnia. That was one of my big symptoms. So I put on the Primal Trust videos when I was awake at night.
Yeah.
Um, and I will share that there are several meditations and things that, even if the other parts weren't great, the meditations are very calming and
Yeah.
kind of help to rethink your mindset a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the big things in the program is finding innate okayness, and I think that's a
Yes.
really big message that people, when they're chronically ill, really need to hear. That
Mhm.
even though you're ill, you're still okay.
Yeah. 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 I find that after being ill for so long, we forget who we are outside of that. And that's part of the pointers of Primal Trust, is to kind of help you get reconnected with the self that can't get sick. And there is a self that can't get sick. Yeah.
All right, we're starting to have some questions. Dr. Cat, we have a question from Anne. She wants to know how to get your book.
Yep. So primaltrust.org is the website, and you go to the free resources tab up at the top. I should have dropped it into the chat box, but primaltrust.org, free resources, and it'll be right there.
Okay, we have a question from Linda. My daughter is 21 and has been sick since age 14. Is this something that can work for a young adult?
Yes, and they need to choose it. So I would say that it's important. Yeah, we do have a lot of young adults in our program. And I always tell parents, it's important that they choose it, because a lot of times kids are so used to getting the message that there's something wrong with them that they can interpret this as a whole other, like, this is wrong with me. A lot of times it's even better if parents are doing this and are like, oh, here's what I'm doing. Or the kid starts to see the parent be different and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm doing this thing. The kid will be like, oh, wow, tell me more about that. So I like to take the jujitsu approach with kids, and you model and they get interested and they choose into it. There's a lot of research out there saying, especially with teenagers, they need to choose into it or they will actually rebel against the process. Yeah.
We have a comment from Denise. She says, I'm a cancer survivor and two times diagnosed with Lyme. This resembles the changes I've seen in cancer care in the last 24 years. Instead of just treating the cancer, they're treating the entire patient
Mhm.
through integrated medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We have a few communities that I know that do very similar processes for cancer, in that they're helping the whole system come back online so that the immune system can get more intelligent about the cancer. It's the same thing with Lyme. We're helping the whole system communicate so that the immune system can get more intelligent and discerning about where the fight is and where it's not. Yeah.
Okay, I
I
don't
would
see
say,
open questions, but yeah, if anybody else has questions, please, we got plenty of time for your questions.
yeah. I often reframe, and this again could be a little bit take it or leave it, that what was going on with me was immune confusion, and that my body got overburdened because my immune system couldn't keep up with what was going on. Not that these infections are any less real, but I think that I had enough evidence. I read enough research of people getting bit, having having Lyme show up, and their function was good. And why was their function good? Because their immune system wasn't going haywire, and they had Lyme and Bart and Babesia and all the things, and yet they were functioning. So after reading all of that and learning more about cell danger response, more about immune system issues, molecular mimicry, immunosenescent cells, and all of the neurobiology that happens, I came to the conclusion that I was stuck in a massive ongoing cell danger response, and that my immune modulation system was haywire. And when I reframed it to that, new solutions came to me because I saw it from a systemic viewpoint versus a pathogenic viewpoint. And our perspective brings solutions to match the perspective. So when I was only thinking about this as a pathogen that needed to be killed, the only answers that came to me were how to kill this pathogen. And it was always an incomplete process for me, and nor could I couldn't even tolerate the process. When I started to think of it through a systems model, that my system is overburdened, that my cells, my cellular protection mechanisms were stuck in a full-on World War III, and that my brain and body were not able to process and keep up, the solutions that I saw were different. And it actually was a more empowering path of like, oh, I can do things to help modulate my immune system. And it doesn't mean you do treatments, but it's almost like I brought into my life things that made more sense for me to help my own system optimize and come into more harmony. And yeah, so I just want to explain that reframe that was helpful for me. And it's been helpful for a lot of people that I work with. It makes you feel less like a victim to what's going on. Yeah. Does this work for chronic illness other than Lyme? My adult daughter has decided her symptoms are no longer due to Lyme or tick-borne pathogens, but she has sleep difficulties, chronic headaches, aches, and pains. Yeah. If your autonomic nervous system is responsible for your symptoms, this would work because this affects your autonomic nervous system. So whether they think it's a stress illness or just migraines or whatever, the nervous system is the nervous system. And you don't have to know exactly what's going on. When the intelligence of the body comes back online or is more optimized because there's more capacity in the nervous system, it can take care of a lot more of these things. I mean, yeah, so I would say it doesn't really matter as long as whatever you're dealing with is in some way influenced by the nervous system. It can be helpful.
This is kind of a strange question, but you had said sometimes people dive in too fast. Like, do you ever see kind of a herxing
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of reaction?
Yeah. So here's the thing, you guys. When your immune system has been so used to interpreting everything as a threat, um, even when you do nervous system work and you change your biochemistry and you change your neurotransmitters and your hormones, that change can also signal threat. Sometimes when we do this, we can cause our system to kind of go through this like emotional flooding, like where it's like we're doing too much too soon. And the immune system can be like, whoa, that emotional release was threatening, and it will just flare just like a herx. So a lot of what's happening with these chronic conditions is the immune system overreacting to internal or external threats. That's why, walking can cause the immune system to overreact. A conversation with so and so, a change in weather, a holiday song, whatever. It is the immune system that is literally got all guns out aiming at everything. And you are needing to like say, we don't need all of those guns shooting at everything. I need you to kind of get a little smarter here and start to notice what we actually need to be dealing with and what we don't. So you kind of want to sneak your way into this just like you would with any protocol, because the immune system is looking. It is looking for what the threat is. And it doesn't know that you doing this new breath practice is safe, because it's going to sense a change in your biochemistry. So if all of a sudden you do like 100 breath work practices that day because you're like, oh, this is good for me, the immune system might be like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I'm sensing all of these differences in the body. There must be, another invader. Who knows? But you have to carefully sneak your way up in the process, I found a lot of the time. Yeah.
Any other questions online there, Bill?
Not seeing any questions at this time, no.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. King, for joining us. We really appreciate all the information you've shared.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate being able to share this information. And like I said, I know it can be a really, it can be a hard thing to think about. And I just encourage you to be open. And let's say my program doesn't resonate. It doesn't really matter. Find things that um, help you feel at ease, help you feel calm. I don't, whether it's Primal Trust or it's listening to music, just taking that perspective of how do I send messages to my body of safety so that my immune system can come into balance. That's the question. That's the big idea here. And I hope that you go away just journaling about that. What could I do that would send a sense of their threat doesn't need to be as big as I've made it. Not that it's not there, but just so that the immune system can get more discerning and in more harmony. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right. I don't think no more questions, Bill.
No questions.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And again, thank you, Dr. King, so much. That was so valuable and informative. We're so appreciative. And for those of you who are interested, as I said earlier, the next virtual Lyme Impact session will be in January. And you can always find that info. We'll be posting that on social media and sending it to your inbox. I think that's everything. So thanks again, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Right.